Welcome to Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table. The podcast for pet groomers ready to start their next chapter. Let's explore what's possible when you trade in the grooming table for the freedom of virtual work. Whether you're done with the physical toll or just craving more flexibility, you're in the right place. We're staying in the pet industry, just shifting how we show up. So take a breath, step away from the table, and let's see what's waiting for you on the other side.
Well, hey there, and welcome to Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table, the podcast for pet pros exploring life, work, and purpose beyond grooming. So, for those of you guys that don't know me, my name is River Lee, and I'm the founder of The Savvy Groomer and Step Away from the Table. So, this November, we are going to be choosing gratitude over grind. We're going to learn to stay calm, communicate clearly, and work with confidence even through this crazy holiday season. So, this episode is going to be about calm, boundaries, and grit, thriving as a VA during the holiday rush. So, if you guys had watched last week's episode, you're realizing that what's really going on behind the scenes during the grooming holiday rush. And this one is kind of about staying grounded during it. So, you guys have seen this chaos, right? And if I'm honest, you've probably lived through it a couple of times. Most of us here have been groomers, and so we've been through that crazy holiday season. So let's talk about what we're actually going to do about it as a virtual assistant for the pet grooming industry to make it through without actually losing our mind. So let's talk about 5 things today. We're going to talk about onboarding, boundaries, calm, grit, and gratitude. And these are the muscles that we're going to make you a good long-term VA, not just a one-season wonder. So let's talk about some practicality here. We're going to talk about clear onboarding is going to make less chaos. So first things first, I really suggest you consider not adding new people during the holiday season. Any busy season, if I'm honest. If you guys have shave down season between March and April, I wouldn't add people then. If you guys have Thanksgiving and Christmas like we do in the US, I don't suggest you onboard new people in November, December. Some of you guys might be like, oh my God, I can't do that because if I do that, then I'm not going to be open to people. Trust me. When you're adding people, when they're already stressed out and there's a lot of chaos, it's not going to be a good time for either of you. They're not going to get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. And then when they do get back to you, everything's going to be an emergency. I really suggest you consider not doing that. That said, I love you all, and it's not uncommon for you guys to do what you want to do instead of what I would consider some best practices. So if you're going to be adding a new, what we call supervisor, and so for those of you guys that may be new to this podcast, we will talk about a supervisor instead of a grooming business owner. Because if we say clients or customers, we try to talk about the dog owners or the pet owners. And I feel like it's important to kind of differentiate between that. So if we mention supervisor, we're talking about the grooming business owner. So, like I said, if they're having their busy season, ideally hold off. If you're going to start onboarding new clients, well, then you need to ask them first things first if they have an SOP manual for everything that they do. Now, for those you guys might not really understand onboarding very quickly, onboarding is basically starting people in a new way. So there's lots of different ways that you can onboard. And again, we do go through some onboarding in the virtual pet groomers fundamental course that we have. But so first things first, ask them if they have SOPs, right? Your standard operating procedures. In again, our virtual assistant for the pet grooming industry fundamental course, we teach you guys how to check if there's holes in their SOPs. We really dive deep into asking them, what does this mean? Okay. So again, if during your consultation they don't have SOPs or there's a lot of holes there where I think a really good example is, if a groomer says short, not shaved, right? That might mean something totally different to me than it does to you. To me, short, not shaved is generally a 5, right? But other groomers might say it's a 7. I've heard groomers say it's a 10. I think 10 is bald. I think that's Mr. Clean bald. But again, everybody has a different length. So this is where basically we're breaking down what does that mean so that when I'm communicating with both my supervisor and their customers, I can create that Rosetta Stone together with them. Now, if they don't have these things, you can add that into your consultation where you're going to have them pay you to do that. Or you can always outsource that to another VA, maybe who likes creating those SOP manuals, or a business coach who can help them kind of organize their business in a little bit of a way. It's really not a bad idea to network with other VAs who have things that are outside of what you want to do. Remember, you don't have to be everything to everybody. And the reality is that most grooming business owners don't have SOP manuals, or they kind of do in their head and they kind of tell you, like, do what you think is best, but that's not an answer, is it? Right? There's nothing worse than having an owner say, do what you want, but then when they show up, they're disappointed anyway. So we want to avoid having that kind of reaction with, an online business. So again, you're going to help them solve the mystery of what do I do if, and, it's going to really help you have your first win during the holiday season. Because when you do have those confusing moments and the booking things or social media, you're going to know exactly what you're doing. So even if they're having a chaotic day and moment, you're really standing in your power and you know what you're supposed to be doing. Another thing you can do is ask them what tools they're currently using. Now, this is really important, especially because there's so many tools now for communication or organization or online. For instance, are they using Slack? I hate Slack, but lots of people love it. I personally love Trello for organizing projects. Some people hate Trello. I love Google Drive. Some people prefer Dropbox. So again, it's all about figuring out what works for you, what works for them, and you need to ask things like, are you still working through screenshots and sticky notes? I can't tell you how many times I will talk to a VA student who has a groomer and they're literally just taking screenshots of everything and just texting it to them. And I'm like, all right, we need to figure out how to organize this better because you can't get 30, 40 screenshot pictures. Like literally, the supervisor will have their computer, their desk up, right? And screenshot things and text it to them. Now, for some of us, we might be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But long term, if I'm going to work for you for the next, 2, 5 years, depending upon how long of a contract we have, this is not a very organized way of doing it. And, I can't be searching through my text again at 30, 40 text messages a day from one supervisor. I might have 5 or 6 supervisors. This is just not an effective way for me to work. So if they don't have structure, remember you can't magically guess their brain. Now, for some of us, because we have worked in the industry, we are better at kind of assuming what you mean. But let's not really work that way. It doesn't really work that well because, again, I might kind of know what you mean, right? Again, short, not shaved. Some of you guys said, yes, it's a 5. Some of you guys said, oh, it's a 7, right? Fairly close, but that could be a big difference to one of their customers. So again, ask them to be clear. And again, it might be tedious in the beginning, but these are the things that are going to be important long term, right? Because I don't want to send that dog out in a 7. I don't want to send that dog out with in a 7 when you wanted a 5 or even a 4, right? That can be a big difference to a customer. Another thing to remind them is that urgent means different things to different person. So the definition of urgent is different because some people, everything is an emergency. Every thought they have is an emergency. Everything you're experiencing is an emergency. Everything must be done now. And for some people, even if it's urgent, they're not going to push it. They're going to just kick the can down the road. And it's important for you as a virtual assistant to know what kind of client the supervisor is, Because if they're the kind of person that kicks the can down the road, it's going to be your job to hold them accountable. And if they're the kind of person who is everything is immediately a problem, I tend to be that way. I tend to be like everything I want to get done. I wish it was done 10 minutes ago. So I'm the kind of person that someone needs to be like, hey, I'm doing these things, okay? So again, if you have a client that says this is urgent and they don't touch it for 2 days, then it wasn't urgent. And now it's just poor planning, right? And that stinks, right? Because it's like, oh my God, you must do this. And you're like, okay, what would you like me to do? And then they kind of ghost you for 2 days because they're busy or because that thing was urgent, but it wasn't really urgent. So this is really important. So if you haven't already learned about the Eisenhower time matrix, I highly suggest that you go check it out. Or if you have, go ahead and brush up on it. So we actually teach this in our pause and prioritize planner. I literally have it next to me on the desk. So this is a planner that I designed, if you guys can see. And in this, we actually teach you guys how to learn more about the Eisenhower time matrix. And this is wonderful because this is going to teach you how to, things like that are important and urgent, things like crises and actual emergencies, but also urgent and not important. Most interruptions, most, emails, calls, meetings, and then there are important but not urgent things that we tend to put off. So consider if you need a planner and need to learn how to prioritize, that's a great planner. If not, don't worry about it. But either way, please brush up on your Eisenhower and time matrix. I believe we've done, if not a podcast, definitely a Grow Wealthy grooming on that. When we'll try to get some show notes into that. I'm going to write a little note for that. Consider keeping a client profile document. Now, everyone's going to organize this in so many different ways, but I would suggest you have their time zone, especially when you're traveling. Time zones are so important. And you can't rely on, oh, they're in this country or oh, they're in this place. It's really important for them to specify their time zone and let them know if you are leaving that time zone, I need to know because again, they may not even think about it. They may go on a quick trip or like people that live in Tennessee. I remember I was staying at a hotel and it was literally like 30 minutes away was the time zone difference. And I had no idea. So I went to go to a restaurant only to find out I had missed a reservation. And little things like that can happen where maybe they don't realize, they don't put two and two together. And that's not uncommon. You know, I think when you're traveling all the time, you think about time zone. But even when I first started traveling, it wasn't really something I had thought about a lot. But where you might have as a virtual assistant 5 or 6 time zones, it's going to be really important for you to start doing that. Other things you might want to do is like, what are their busiest day? If their shop on Sunday or Saturday is bullshit crazy, don't message them. Make a little list. Don't message so and so. Leave them alone. Let them do what they've got to do. At the same time, maybe instead it's Wednesday. Who knows? If you want to get a little bit more advanced, what is their preferred tone? And I know that sounds really weird, but do they like emojis? I love me some emojis. I think emojis are context. I have a student who hates emojis. They think that it's really childish and stupid. I still send emojis, but if you're the kind of person who wants to curtail that, you can do that. Also, because again, we have a lot of people on the spectrum in the pet industry, you might have a client who prefers very direct, texting and messaging. I tend to be the kind of person I treat text messages like a continuous conversation. I don't want good morning, how are you before you tell me what you need. Just tell me what you need. Versus other people really want that, hey, Susie Q, how are you? How was your night? How's your week? How's the dog? And again, you as a VA, when you're onboarding clients, you want to find out those things, but also you need to know what makes you happy. Personally, I would rather shoot myself in the face than have lots of small talk every day, all day. But that's me, and you may thrive on that. Just remember time is money and be careful of that. It's also important to know their pet peeves and who's allowed to make decisions. and what decisions are they allowed to make? Again, I don't want you to be responsible for something that is out of your viewpoint. Now, if you're a virtual assistant who is in that foundational level, right? Or either a virtual receptionist or you're someone doing these kind of admin tasks, back of office tasks, you should not be making any decisions. You should be allowing your boss, right, your supervisor to make those decisions. And that's really important because unless if you are a manager, you should not be doing any managing. So I would highly suggest, again, you set that boundary. Um, Different conversation for a different day, but we'll talk about that in the future. So remember, if a client hates Trello, now again, I love Trello. And say, and you maybe you love it. Great. And decide if somebody doesn't like it. Let's say for that. Um, decide if you're going to be, these are the things I use. This is all I use. And if you don't use it, I'm not using other things. Personally, for instance, like Trello and Asana are very similar project management. I wouldn't work with somebody collaboratively who would want to use Asana because I can't, it doesn't work for my brain. And so if they're like, oh, we're going to collaborate on Asana, I would say, not for nothing, this doesn't work for me. And, if you want to use Asana for yourself and then for anything collaborative, I'm happy to use Google Docs or Trello. But if you're stuck on Asana, I can't work with you. That's an option. You can say, if you don't work within the softwares or the technology that I need to use, the tools I need to use, it's okay to say no, thank you. That goes too for grooming software. On the flip side, if you're flexible, right, you can always learn about it, right? And again, it can go either way. Either you're like, oh, I'm excited to use whatever and learn whatever. That's great. Or, oh, I can only use what I can use. That's also great. And again, some of us can only use the tools that mesh with us. I'm one of those people. Once I learn something and it works for my brain, I don't want to learn 10 different softwares. I found what I like. It works for me. That's how I want to do things. And some of us are happy to use Google Sheets for everything, you know? I mean, remember, if you don't like their tool or vice versa, it's not about you, it's not about them. It's about a system that actually works for whoever it is, okay? And again, it's up to you to decide if you want to work with these other tools or not. Going back to onboarding, please, please, please set those expectations in writing. And again, that can even be a shared, Google Doc. And for instance, if you're only going to use Trello or Asana for those things, put that as an expectation in that document. That way, you're both on the same page. Don't just expect them to magically know that's the tool you're going to use and that's the only tool you're going to use. Don't assume that they know how to even onboard you. They may not know how to integrate you into their business, right? Groomers hire VAs because they're overwhelmed and they're hoping on some level that you're going to guide them through it. And sometimes it is a little bit of the blind leading the blind, but for better, for worse, I think you guys have it. You're going to learn how to do it. I think a really good example is if they say like, "Oh, I'll send you that password later." You're like, "Hey, I can't log into this." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'll send it to you later." And, normally you might say, "Okay, whatever." But as you're growing as a VA, a better option would be to say, "Awesome. Can you drop it in like if you guys use LastPass, right? Or, hey, before you get off the phone, can you just email it to me right now?" Right? You want to start training them gently. A lot of groomers are on the spectrum. As somebody with ADHD, if I don't do it now, it's probably not getting done. If it doesn't exist in my calendar or my planner, it will be gone out of my head. I wish that wasn't true. I literally have like a mini notebook. I have this and I have my phone. Like, I just need all of these things to help me stay organized. And is that flattering? No, but it's the reality. And I think that's where instead of wishing we were different, I think we need to learn how to work within what we have. Okay. So every ounce of confusion in onboarding is just going to create chaos later. So everything you leave up to chance later is just going to come back and bite you in the booty. Okay. And remember, structure isn't about making you controlling, it's about making you calm. Creating boundaries setting expectations. Remember that if you're new to being a virtual assistant, you're going to have to learn sometimes the hard way, which really sucks, okay? Is it painful? Yes. But just like you guys were learning how to groom and you had to learn by doing, this is going to be a learned practice too. I'm always going to do my best to give you guys best practices. It's up to you to follow them. And sometimes my best practices don't work for you either. So don't feel bad if they don't work for you, okay? But I'm going to do my very best to give you guys some ideas or some tips and tricks that hopefully will work out for you. Let's talk about boundaries, but with a little bit of heart. So boundaries aren't rude, they're kindness on a schedule. So when you tell your supervisor, here's when I'm available, you're actually being super supportive, right? They can rely on you, they're not chasing you around, they're not sending you text messages at 2 a.m. And if they are, you've set the reasonable expectation that, hey, I'm not going to be able to talk to you till tomorrow at 9, right? And again, think about it like guardrails on a road. They're not there, right, to stop you from going places. What they're doing is making sure you don't end up off in a ditch. And for some people, they're like, I want to be in the ditch. And listen, I'm here for you. That's fine. But I just think maybe you should stay on the road, the nice, pretty paved path road. Okay? Don't ghost your clients. I know that's something you want to do, like especially like say on weekends, right? Just set up an auto sender and example, like one that says, hey, I'm signed off for the weekend. I'll be back on Monday at 9. Something simple, professional done, especially in the beginning of people that are not used to having time off. A lot of groomers do this too, where they're not setting office hours. It may be something where you've kind of gently have to let them know because they may be used to just sending you a message, right? And saying, no big deal. So again, if that supervisor texts you at 10 p.m., you're not going to answer them, right? You can reply in the morning with, thanks for sending this. I'll tackle this first thing, right? Same thing with their grooming clients. If their grooming clients send you a message at 10 p.m., you're not going to be texting them back. Why? Because it's inappropriate. And I think one of the worst things that we do is that. Like, I don't mind if you send me a text message at 10 p.m. I just have a problem if you expect me to respond to you at 10 p.m. And as somebody who's that annoying morning person who will text you at 5 a.m. if you've texted me at 10 p.m., what's good for the goose is good for the gander, baby. So another thing your supervisor might say is, can you squeeze this in tonight? Right? Can and it could be something like, oh, I forgot, and they just genuinely mean it, right? You can just gently say, hey, I can start this in the morning, or hey, I had planned on doing this. Would you like me to prioritize this? Again, boundaries can sound really scary, especially when they're new, but it's going to build a lot of respect between you and your supervisor. And I promise you that people will learn how to treat you properly. And yes, you will get pushback a little bit. And again, it's not malicious, it's just habit. I think a lot of people have accidentally been taught to respond immediately to text messages, phone calls, etc., that now it feels rude not to respond. So I think that's it. You just got to break those patterns. And again, especially in the grooming industry where we kind of run on this like emergency adrenaline, everything feels last minute, right? And you can't let that be your default either. This is a totally different energy, right? There isn't like if you don't hustle bustle, the dog's not going to get out, right? This is something where you're going to have to pace yourself. This is more of a marathon than a sprint. You can say to yourself, I can care deeply about my supervisor and still protect my peace. Okay. If you keep texting all weekend, and schedule that quick and, little call, right? So for instance, let's say if you say, hey, you send a little message, I don't work on the weekends, I'm happy to get back to this on Monday at 9. I personally would rather work on weekends, but let's say you don't, right? Then you can just say that gently. And if they keep texting you, you can always, I would personally mute them, right? What I actually do, I use WhatsApp. Um, I don't have it so much now, but back when I had a lot more coaching clients, I had some people that really did not respect boundaries. I have a 48-hour turnaround, and I had one student who was really, really pushy, 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 and really didn't have any respect for my boundaries. So what I would do is I would say, hey, I will get back to this day, time. I would mute them. And on WhatsApp, you can put them in the archive. So I would archive them so I don't see them at all. And then I would pull everything back out in the morning. And I mean, I might have like this giant wall of text. And part of me feels terrible because I feel like I've abandoned this person, etc. But also they will live. This is not life or death, right? This is dog grooming. So I think that's where you have to find the balance between I can't be the person that is there for you 24/7. All I can do is be the person for you when it's fair for me. And I think that's really important as a virtual assistant for you guys to start learning how to do that, right? And you may need to say, hey, I want to make sure that we're on the same page with communication. What works best for the both of us, right? You might have to have that adult conversation. And again, pull up that Google Doc and say, what is this going on? Now, you can also offer an additional, more expensive off hours service, right? So if they want you to be on call, don't be afraid to have them put their money where their mouth is, right? If I'm going to be on call as an employee, you're going to pay me for all those hours that I'm working. And I think that a lot of people don't actually want to pay you for those extra hours. They just want you to be available when they need you, but you can't be available 24/7 to people like that. It's just not good for you. Remember, when you're talking to them, it's not about confrontation. It's about being, a good business owner and ultimately having some sanity. Because I was talking to my son about this. You know, you can't be on call. Like, we're not surgeons, we're not doctors. Yes, I don't care if you want to text me at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night. But no, I'm probably not going to respond to you. And you have to be okay with that in order to be one of my, grooming business owner clients, my supervisor, right? Because I'm not going to work for somebody who's going to expect me to be on call 24 hours a day, like a surgeon, like a judge, right? Like a high-powered attorney. Right? You're not paying me like that. And honestly, I don't know about you, but I don't want that life. So things to consider, maybe practice a little bit. Ask yourself, if your client texted you tonight asking for one more thing, how would you phrase that boundary kindly? Okay, I want you to think about how you would do that. And then write it down. And so when it does happen, you've got the words already. Scripts are great because they're going to allow you to practice. And then when it happens, you're not emotional. You can just let it flow. That brings me to choosing calm over chaos. Now, when you get a message, pause, don't type yet. Maybe go stand up, stretch, grab some water, grab a snacky or a blankie. Okay. And if you can't do that or you're not ready yet, open up a new message and write down all the feelings and then send it to a friend or put it somewhere it's not going to do your business harm. Okay. Half of being a great VA is tone control, which really sucks sometimes. But if you want your supervisor to trust you with their customers, you need to show them that you can be calm under uncomfortable circumstances. Okay, I'm not saying they should test you, but if they're being a little testy, it's up to you to bring calm to the chaos, right? Not to match your client's stress. I'm not saying let someone be abusive to you. What I am saying is if someone is really stressed out or pissed off, you're not going to match their energy, right? If your supervisor says something like, why isn't this post up already? You can respond with something like, hey, I hear you. That's the one I've been waiting for approval for. Would you like me to post it as is? Calm, factual, but not defensive. And if let's say they send 5 things at once, you get this giant wall of text. You can pick one, reply with, got it. I'll start with the client reminders and then I'll follow up with the rest, right? I use WhatsApp, and what I'll do is I'll respond and I will thumbs up as I do things. Okay. Again, you can use tools as shields. Trello, Asana, ClickUp, those are project management tools. Whatever works for you. The moment something feels chaotic, turn it into a list, okay? And you can always ask them to put the list in an order that makes sense to them. If you have a way that works flow better, you should do it. But if they're like, hey, I want this, that's fine, right? And if they ask for so and so to get done, right, then you have to show them the list and say, okay, you want this done? Well, currently it's third from the list. You want me to move it up? I'm going to stop this project to get this done, right? I can't do these things simultaneously. I wouldn't say don't can't do this simultaneously, but again, you're explaining to them. And they know that in their head, but sometimes, again, that grooming, manic, rush, go, 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 go energy, right, in the grooming industry doesn't translate very well to the VA industry. Okay, you can't do this office work the same way that we did grooming. It doesn't work that way. So again, let them know that they're welcome to rearrange with your consent. And your calm tone is going to help regulate their chaos, right? If someone is upset, your goal is to be calm. If you're a music person, have a playlist that calms you down. If you are the kind of person that works best 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, embrace it. You know, time breaks are great for everyone. Know which way works best for you. For me, I generally do better with, if I'm doing something that's very labor intense, like, for instance, like recording podcasts, it is very labor intense. It's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of organizing. I can do an hour on that I need about 15 minutes off, an hour on, 15 minutes off. Versus coaching, I can do 4 or 5 hour blocks and then I want a 2 hour break, right? So you need to learn the rhythm of the way that you work best. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's about what works best for you. Now, I will say, please don't confuse that kind of fast, manic, productive energy, right? Well, fast isn't always effective. Long-term strategy needs to be systems over speed when you're working on the computer. And I know it seems really weird, but I'm telling you, you know, I would sometimes I miss being physically exhausted versus when you're mentally exhausted, but your body is not tired, it's a very different kind of tired. Being, emotionally exhausted by talking with people and solving things for people, it can be a totally different energy. So you're going to need different strategies and you're going to need to have more of that marathon mindset, right? Again, when you're grooming the dogs in front of you, and then when the dogs are done for the day, you clean the shop and you leave. And that's something I think we don't think about is that when I'm done grooming, I leave. And yeah, I might have appointments and things like that. But when you're a virtual assistant, that whole thing could be 24 hours a day if you don't set healthy boundaries. So go ahead and write down 3 sentences that you can use to diffuse some tension. For example, got it. Here's where we're at. I hear you. Here's what I can do right now. Or let's create a solution for next time. So every time you choose calm over chaos, you're training your nervous system to support them as well as you. Building grit before the roster grows. While you're growing your business, it's incredibly important. If you have multiple supervisors, you're really going to be careful the way you're growing this. So grit is steady, not saying yes to everything. Okay. Consistency beats intensity every single time. As somebody who struggles with consistency, honestly, truly, it is a struggle. And I will tell you what, you know, burning yourself out instead of learning how to maintain is a skill set. And it's something that some of us are going to have to work on the rest of our lives. Remember, if your day goes sideways, ask, what did this teach me? I know it's really feels very corny and kind of silly, but it's really important because when you turn anger or frustration into curiosity, it's going to make you feel so much better. Reflect weekly what drained me, what went well. This is something, again, in the pause and prioritize planner. We actually do this every single week. We have, I don't know if you can see this right here. Very important. Things that made me happy this week. things I achieved this week, things I am grateful for this week. Incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important to stay sane. I'm telling you. Okay. And again, if a client keeps crossing lines, it's data, it's not drama. Observe the way people treat you. Observe the way that people may or may not treat you well. Okay. And I don't suggest firing anyone during the holiday season. I mean, obviously, if they're abusive, if they're really nasty, but if they're just not their best selves, I would really suggest that you consider waiting, seeing if they're going to be better. I know some people are just not their best selves in the holiday season, and I'm not saying that you deserve to deal with that, but I think you would wish for some grace when that was to happen. And again, you always can move on with your life afterwards. Now, if something is not your job, you can always say, hey, that's outside my scope and say it early, right? Don't just agree to do something, say, nope, can't do it. For example, let's say if they're like, hey, I'm happy to help you with the admin tasks that I've been contracted to do, but social media strategy really isn't part of my package. I'm more than happy to recommend someone, right? And again, it's really good to do that. You're not lazy for wanting to clear what your scope is in your services. You're being sustainable. You can't be a jack of all trades. I know people want to be. I don't suggest you do that because there's going to be things you don't love. There's going to be things that really light you up. And I would rather have five supervisors doing what you love than two supervisors doing a whole lot of stuff that makes you unhappy. Okay. And remember that grit doesn't mean burnout. It's about endurance, okay? And you can't be long-term useful if you are short-term fried. A chaotic week doesn't mean you failed. It means that you're learning systems to make it easier. Again, it's like when you're grooming in the beginning, things that in the beginning were so stressful and so hard later are effortless, right? For me, that was working with really straight coats and trying not to create lines and having to go back through with thinning shears. And I remember when I was just thinning shear the whole freaking dog because I had to get rid of the lines. And then obviously as I got better, and got more used to what I was doing, right? I may either bought better products, I had better equipment, whatever it was that I needed to then get a better finish on that groom. It's going to be the same way with your VA skills, okay? The goal isn't to survive the holiday season. The goal is how to learn to make next busy season even smoother. So let's talk about gratitude and growth. So gratitude doesn't mean pretending everything's fine. I really struggle because listen, I'm a very happy person at this point in my life. Life's pretty good. But it is all about noticing progress, okay? Instead of saying, "Ugh, that client really pissed me off," or "I swear that supervisor is going to make me rip my hair out." It's time to say, "Okay, I know how to clarify next time." It might be something like, "Oh, this client didn't know this, so next time I will do that." Right? Um, and it's about celebrating the small wins, how to learn how to say no with grace, how you kept calm when someone snapped at you, right? And you held your position, but you were kind and firm. Maybe you created a new template that saved you 10 minutes today, right? You're learning and you're growing, and I think that's so important. I highly suggest you keep a gratitude note on your desk, maybe three things that went right this week. I do think it's important to help stay sane. And one of the ways you can do that, for better, for worse, is to keep notes on the things that make you happy. Because in the moment where you're really pissed off or you're really frustrated, you can see the things that are make you happy. I normally say like, I'm grateful, I'm learning, and it's okay that I'm messy. It's okay if it's messy, right? Because when you zoom out, you'll see how far you've come since, your last client panic attack or your supervisor, just completely making you crazy. And some of it is, for better or for worse, not the best onboarding. Maybe they weren't the right fit, or, for better or for worse, maybe they're not their best self. And you've learned that you need to do more prep work, or you need them to do more prep work, right? Or you're not going to be a part of their crazy next year, you know? there's lots of things that they could do in their business. We just talked about the holiday season on our Greedy Bitch podcast. Things like in my grooming salon, if I didn't see you in September and October, I didn't see you in November, December. Why? Because I'm not doing a once-a-year dog. I'm not doing a dog who hasn't been groomed in 3, 4 months around Thanksgiving or Christmas. No, thank you. I didn't do, towards the end, I didn't do dogs the week of Thanksgiving and Christmas. I would do a bath and tidy, which you didn't do any other time of year, or a bath. We did no full haircuts the week of Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? And we would do that because it would take all the stress and pressure off of ourselves. So again, these might be things when you move into a management role, an office manager role that you might help guide them towards. Um, there's lots of options, right? I think it's really important to remember that gratitude doesn't erase the chaos, it just balances it out. You can be tired and thankful, both can coexist. And if I'm honest, it's important to realize that the better and better you get, you're going to be happier with the systems that you build, right? The systems you're building now during the crazy will make it easier for the systems in the future. So remember, take a breath. This season is wild, but you've got it, okay? You've got tools, you can onboard, boundaries, calm, grit, and you're going to focus on being grateful. Now, pick one focus this week. Don't try to fix it all, okay? Don't try to solve everything. Maybe it's just going to be saying no once, or maybe it's going to get paid for writing a new SOP for one of your supervisors. Remember, you're not behind, you're building a foundation of your virtual assistant business, or you're building these skills as a virtual assistant. And again, if this hit home, please come check us out. For those of you guys that have joined the Step Away from the Table virtual assistant for the pet grooming industry fundamentals, we do have our private Facebook group. And if you have taken our course or are interested in taking our course, please reach out. In our group, we actually share our wins and even our chaotic moments. And remember, if you guys left grooming for flexibilities, you're not here to trade scissors for burnout. Okay. This is a different kind of burnout. And either way, it's not the goal. Okay. So let's build a business of calm, a life of calm, and ultimately, I want you to find that balance, whatever that balance is for you, okay? Because for better or for worse, you guys deserve it. Everyone deserves to have a good time, relax, and enjoy themselves. And hopefully, this holiday season, you are finding a little bit of balance. So, thank you guys so much for being here today. As always, my name is River Lee, and I'm the founder of the Savvy Groomer and Step Away from the Table. You can check those out at both www.savvy, S-A-V-V-Y, groomer.com or stepawayfromthetable.com. And this was Calm Boundaries and Grit, Thriving as a VA during the holiday rush. All right, guys, thank you so much. And as always, happy grooming. Thanks for joining me on Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table. If today's episode sparked something in you, don't forget to follow, share, or leave a review. It helps more groomers like you find their next step. You don't have to do this alone, but you get to do it your way. Until next time, take a deep breath and keep moving forward.